Freediving, skin diving, or freediving is a form of underwater diving that relies on divers' ability to hold the breath until resurfacing rather than on the use of a breathing apparatus such as scuba gear. Recognized examples of freediving activities include traditional fishing techniques, competitive and non-competitive freediving, competitive and non-competitive spearfishing and freediving photography, synchronized swimming, underwater football, underwater rugby, underwater hockey, underwater hunting other than spearfishing, underwater target shooting and snorkeling. The term freediving is often associated with competitive breath-hold diving, a competitive apnea. However, while some regard freediving as a specific group of underwater activities, for others it is merely a synonym for breath-hold diving. The activity that attracts the most public attention is the extreme sport of competitive apnea, in which competitors attempt to attain great depths, times, or distances on a single breath. The use of the term to describe breath-hold diving should be recognized as late 20th century in origin, which has been popularly expanded to apply to earlier diving activities. The bibliography of diving history clearly indicates that the term free diving had already been used in the early 1950s by American users of self-contained compressed air breathing equipment to describe the type of diving which is not constrained by connection to a surface air supply, and where the diver has approximately neutral buoyancy and is free to move in 3 dimensions, although it was probably French in origin. Featuring in the title sequence of the Cousteau film Epaves. History. Freediving was practiced in ancient cultures to gather food, harvest resources like sponge and pearl, or reclaim sunken valuables, and to help aid military campaigns. In ancient times, freediving without the aid of mechanical devices was the only possibility, with the exception of the occasional use of reeds and leather breathing bladders. The divers faced the same problems as divers today, such as decompression sickness and blacking out during a breath hold. Because of these dangers, diving in antiquity could be quite deadly. Freediving for commercial, rather than recreational purposes may have begun in ancient Greece, since both Plato and Homer mention the sponge as being used for bathing. The island of Kalymnos was a main center of diving for sponges. By using weights of as much as 15 kilograms to speed the descent, breath-holding divers would descend to depths up to 30 meters for as much as 5 minutes to collect sponges. Sponges weren't the only valuable harvest to be found on the sea floor. The harvesting of red coral was also quite popular. A variety of valuable shells of fish could be harvested in this way, creating a demand for divers to harvest the treasures of the sea, which could also include the sunken riches of other seafarers. The AMA divers from Japan began to collect pearls about 2,000 years ago. The Mediterranean had large amounts of maritime trade. As a result of shipwrecks, particularly in the fierce winter storms, divers were often hired to salvage whatever they could from the seabed. Divers would swim down to the wreck and choose the most valuable pieces to salvage. These salvage divers faced many dangers on the job, and as a result, laws, such as the Lex Rhodia, were enacted that awarded a large percentage of the salvage to the divers in wrecks deeper than 50 feet. Divers received 1/3 of the salvage, and in wrecks deeper than 90 feet, they received half. Divers were also used in warfare. Defenses against sea vessels were often created, such as underwater barricades aimed at sinking enemy ships. As the barricades were hidden under the water, divers were often used to scout out the seabed when ships were approaching an enemy harbor. Once these barricades were found, it was divers who were used to disassemble them, if possible. During the Peloponnesian War, divers were used to get past enemy blockades to relay messages as well as supplies to allies or troops that were cut off by the blockade. On top of all that, these ancient frogmen were used as saboteurs, drilling holes in enemy hulls, cutting ships' rigging and mooring. Competition. Competitive freediving is currently governed by two world associations, AIDA International and CMAS. Each organization has its own rules on recognizing a record attempt. These can be found on the website from the respective organizations. Most types of competitive freediving have in common that it is an individual sport based on the best individual achievement. An exception to this rule is the biannual World Championship for teams, held by AIDA, where the combined score of the team members makes up the team's total points. Another exception is the Scandella Petradiving by CMAS. Disciplines. There are currently 11 recognized disciplines defined by AIDA and CMAS, and a dozen more that are only practiced locally. All disciplines can be practiced by both men and women and while done outdoors. No differences in the environment between records are any longer recognized. The disciplines of AIDA can be done both in competition and as a record attempt, with the exception of variable weight and no limits, which are both solely for record attempts. For all AIDA depth disciplines, the depth the athlete will attempt is announced before the dive. This is accepted practice for both competition and record attempts. AIDA recognized world records as of the 3rd of July 2016. The AIDA recognized world records are CMAS recognized world records. As of June 2016, the CMAS recognized world records are recreational. Freediving is also a recreational activity, celebrated as a relaxing, liberating and unique experience significantly different from scuba diving. The advantages freediving has over scuba diving are less equipment to wear, greater mobility and speed, lower diving costs, shorter preparation time, no decompression time for deep dives because the dive duration is so short. Repetitive deep free dives can result in decompression sickness, greater visibility due to a lack of exhaled air bubbles, no distracting sounds like regulator breathing, greater time in the water since air tank refills are not needed. Experienced freedivers can often go as deep as scuba divers, and sometimes deeper. Recreational scuba diving is generally limited by diver certification to a maximum of 40 meters, for reasons of safety. Recreational divers who dive to deeper depths are generally expected by the certification agencies to have technical diver training, while freediving is only limited by the diver's ability and willingness to accept the risks. Recreational freediving is practiced by many people ranging from the average snorkeler to the professional freediver. Recreational freediving is also frequently practiced in freshwater springs due to excellent visibility. Freediving into spring caverns and caves is very different from diving in the ocean or other open water. Even though every spring cave is unique, these are the general differences. A dive light is usually required. The freediver must usually swim laterally to exit the cave before ascending to the surface. The freediver may also pull on large rocks of the cave structure to exit the cave. The freediver must avoid staring up silt so that visibility is not lost. To conserve energy, oxygen, if possible, the current should be avoided while entering the cave, but it can be used to help exit the cave. If the freediver is penetrating the cave so far that surface light is lost, proper navigation and passage recognition is vital along with a backup dive light. If large air pockets are found inside the cave, they are usually unsafe to breathe from. Usually a monofin is impractical to use due to limited space. Some cave passages are so small the shorter fins are better to use than long freediving fins. The risk of drowning when freediving in an overhead environment is significantly increased. Loss of light, silting, losing the guideline in the dark and any other form of disorientation disorientation is likely to have fatal consequences. The time that a freediver can spend underwater on a single excursion is severely restricted in comparison with scuba, and a considerably greater level of fitness is required for longer breath-hold times. A scuba diver generally has sufficient time to recover from a minor disorientating incident in a cave, as there is sufficient breathing gas to perform the recovery procedures. This is not available to the freediver, who has only the oxygen still available in his/her system. Physiology. The human body has several oxygen-conserving adaptations that manifest under diving conditions as part of the mammalian diving reflex. The adaptations include reflex bradycardia, significant drop in heart rate, blood shift, blood flow and volume is redistributed towards vital organs by means of a reflex vasoconstriction. Blood vessels distend and become engorged, which in the case of the pulmonary capillaries assists with pressure compensation that comes with increasing diving depth, and without which a largely air-filled chest cavity would simply collapse for lack of compliance. Body cooling. Peripheral vasoconstriction results in cooling of peripheral tissue beds, which lower their oxygen demand in a thermodynamic manner. In addition, Murat et al. Recently discovered that breath-holding results in prompt and substantial brain cooling, just like in diving birds and seals. Breath holds result in cooling on the order of about 1 degree Celsius per minute, but this is likely to be greater with cold water submersion, in proportion to the magnitude and promptness of the dive response. Splenic contraction, releasing red blood cells carrying oxygen. Techniques. Breath-holding ability and, hence dive performance, is a function of onboard oxygen stores, scope for metabolic rate reduction, efficient oxygen utilization, and hypoxia tolerance. Various athletes attempt to accomplish this in various ways. By and large, most divers rely on increasing fitness by increasing lung capacity, by backpacking and hyperventilating, both of which increase lung oxygen stores. Needless to say, simple breath-holding is highly effective for increasing lung capacity. In addition, training is allocated to enhance blood and muscle oxygen stores to a limited extent. A substantial proportion of performance is the result of metabolic suppression and redistribution of blood oxygen stores, the so-called dive response. Training for freediving can take many forms and be performed on land. One example is the apnea walk. This consists of a preparation, breathe up, followed by a short breath hold taken at rest. Without breaking the hold, the participant then initiates a walk for as far as they can, until it becomes necessary to breathe again. Athletes can do close to 400 meters in training this way. This form of training is good for accustoming muscles to work under anaerobic conditions, and for tolerance to CO2 buildup in the circulation. It is also easy to gauge progress, as increasing distance can be measured. Before competition attempt, freedivers perform preparation sequence, which usually consists of physical stretching, mental exercise and breath exercise. It may include sequential of variable length static apnea, special purging deep breaths, hyperventilation. Result of preparation sequence is slower metabolism, lower heart rate and breath rate, lower level of CO2 in bloodstream and overall mental equilibrium. Failing ordinary warning signals or crossing mental barrier by strong will may lead to shallow water blackout to deep water blackout. Trained freedivers are well aware of this and will only dive under strict and first aid competent supervision. However, this does not eliminate the risk of deeper shallow water blackout. All safe freedivers have a buddy who accompanies them, observing from within the water at the surface. Due to the nature of the sport, any practice of freediving must include strict adherence to safety measures as an integral part of the activity, and all participants must also be adept in rescue and resuscitation. Without proper training and supervision, freediving, apnea, breath-hold diving is extremely dangerous. The death of Nicholas Meverly, a diver from New York, highlights the dangers of freediving. He died on the 17th of November 2013 after completing a dive to a depth of 72 meters. Fiction and documentaries. The Pearl by John Steinbeck is a novel about a poor pearl diver, Kino, who finds the Pearl of Heaven, which is exceptionally valuable, changing his life forever. The novel explores themes of man's nature as well as greed and evil. In South Sea Adventure by Willard Price, the Hunt brothers, marooned on a coral island, use free diving to collect both pearls and fresh water. In Ian Fleming's James Bond novel You Only Live Twice, the character Kissy Suzuki is an AMA diver. This connection was also mentioned in the film version. Man from Atlantis was a 1970s TV series which featured a superhero with the ability to breathe underwater and free dive in his own special way. The Big Blue is a romantic film about two world-class freedivers, a heavily fictionalized depiction of the rivalry of freedivers Jacques Mayol and Enzo Maiorca. Ocean Men is a documentary film about the art and science of freediving, featuring two of its most outstanding exponents, Francisco Pippin Ferreras and Umberto Pellizzari. In the movie Phoenix Blue, protagonist Rick is a musician who freedives competitively. The children's novel The Dolphins of Laurentum by Caroline Lawrence, which takes place in ancient Rome, describes the applications of freediving and its hazards, as one of the principal characters, as well as the main antagonist, try to beat each other to a sunken treasure. The Freediver is a film about a talented female freediver who is discovered and brought to an island, where she is trained by an ambitious scientist to break a freediving world record currently held by an American woman. In the film Into the Blue starring Jessica Alba, a group of divers find themselves in deep trouble with a drug lord after they come upon the illicit cargo of a sunken airplane in the Caribbean. Jessica Alba is an accomplished freediver and did much of the underwater work. Some other stunts were performed by Megan Heaney Grier. In Greg Illy's novel Blood Memory, the main character, Kat Ferry, is an odontologist and a freediver. H2O Just Add Water Series 3 added a freediver as a regular. Freediving is featured in some episodes. The Greater Meaning of Water is an independent film about competitive constant weight freediving, focusing on the zen of freediving. In the Canadian television series Corner Gas, the character Karen Pelly competed in static apnea, ranking 5th in Canada with a personal best of over 6 minutes. On a long breath with the quadruple world champion of freediving Pierre Froller is an invite to share interactions with wild underwater world in the restricted time of an apnea. Directed by Philippe Gerard. In the American television series Baywatch episode The Chamber, the character Mitch Buchanan rescues a diver trapped 90 feet below the ocean surface, but almost dies while suffering the effects of decompression sickness. Decompression sickness is highly improbable following freediving exposure to this depth.